Hey everybody, welcome back to Horror Trans. My name is Stephanie Bree. I'm a transgender woman and I talk about all things horror. And I have a confession. I fucked up. The last time I reviewed this movie, I reviewed the wrong movie. I actually watched and reviewed Amityville 3D, which was the third in the franchise, but I incorrectly labeled the video OG Amityville Horror, and I refer to it as such in the video, so I want to apologize for that. I goofed. And I didn't even catch my mistake until I sat down to watch Amityville 3D, specifically to review it, and I was like, as I was watching it, I was like, oops, this is the movie I just reviewed. So that was my mistake. However, I have actually seen the original Amityville Horror, so I didn't need to rewatch it to review it, because I've actually seen it multiple times in my life. And I've read the book twice when I was a kid. So I'm very familiar with this story, and I don't know how I screwed up the last video, because I know what happens in this movie. And it's not at all what I described in that previous video. So if you watched that video and then you jumped into the Amityville Horror on my recommendation, you were probably thinking I'm an idiot. So I apologize for that. So, this movie, and this is the OG Haunted House movie. I don't really have to tell you all that much about it, and I don't really want to spoil it, because this is the one that started it all. There really, I don't want to say there weren't any haunted house movies before this one, because obviously there were, and people are going to comment which ones they were that I forgot if I don't mention the fact that this wasn't the actual 100% first. Obviously it wasn't. But this is the one that establishes not all of, but most of the tropes that you expect from a haunted house movie. You know, and this is the most famous haunted house story, at least in America, probably in the world. Because, one, it's been blown up into a ginormous franchise and spin-offs and copycats and references and everything else. So, even if you've never seen the Amityville Horror, you know what the Amityville Horror is, or you at least have a rough sketch in your brain of what it is. So I don't have to tell you that much about it. And I don't want to spoil it too much, because it's actually a legit good movie. And, honestly, I would say, well, of the few, and I'm not going to put a number on them because I don't want to spoil which ones I've seen that I haven't reviewed yet. Of the ones I have seen, well, I guess it wouldn't make a difference, would it? Of the ones I have seen, it's by far the best. It is loosely, allegedly, sort of based on a true story, and it actually does, very much like The Conjuring, reference real life, actual events. However, since the 70s, when this book was written and the movie was made based on the book, it has essentially come to light, and I have to put this out there, that many of the accounts that were referenced in the book and the film that we're talking about may have been exaggerated or fabricated. So let's get that out there. So I'm not going to put my rubber stamp and say this is an absolute true story. However, I'm not a skeptic. Y'all know this. I'm a pagan witch. I believe in the supernatural. So, I still take the stance that something happened, and most likely their lawyers were like, alright, people will believe this, but what you just told me they won't believe, so let's change it to this. I'm gonna, and I know there was some accusations of fraud, and Ed and Lorraine Warren were involved in the investigation and some other stuff. I'm staying out of that. We're just talking about the fucking movie right now. But I have to put this out there because you can't really talk about it without some context. So let's talk about the highlights. First of all, movie is creepy as fuck. It's got fantastic music and atmosphere, really good use of lighting and shadows and camera angles and all that good stuff. Really beautifully shot movie. I'm going to say really well paced. It's a slow burn, but it builds quickly enough. It doesn't keep you hanging. Whether you believe any of it, or none of it, or parts of it, or some combination of those sentences really happened or not is irrelevant, because on its own, as a story, it's a good story, and it's still a compelling story, and it's still a scary movie. However, I have to backpedal one more time, because it's relevant. Whether or not the haunted house stuff is true is not relevant, but the murders that are depicted in the movie are 100% true. That part of the movie 100% did happen. There was an investigation, there was a conviction, a trial, everything. Sentencing, the whole 9 yards. So there are actual, there are people in this movie, characters in this movie who died in real life. And this is well documented. So it is technically loosely based on a partial true story. That is not debatable. How much of it is true, we can argue until the end of time. But the murders that are depicted in this film did really happen. So this is kind of, almost, in a roundabout way, technically a true crime movie as well. Because the true crime, the crime part of it, the murders, really did happen. The haunting, whatever. Believe what you want. Believe what you want. But you have two main characters, the mom and the dad. The mom played by Margot Kidder, rest in peace. You know her from Superman and other stuff. Black Christmas, horror proto-slasher? Anyways, she's a scream queen, I guess you could say. Although, anyways. So the gist of it is they're a religious family. I'm not going to pinpoint what their religion is. I'll say Christians. I don't know which branch of Christianity they are, because they look very Catholic, but it could be Anglican, because Anglican and Catholic are like cousins, you know, cousins that get down and dirty when you're not looking, kind of thing. But anyways, so they buy this house that in the real the true story part of it is this guy went crazy and murdered his family. And so they buy this house that a bunch of murders took place in. So that much is absolutely true. Now, all the characters in this movie are also real people. They really did buy this house. They really did go to the church and make accusations that things were happening. So a lot of the chain of events in this movie, I'd put a high probability on having occurred. The supernatural elements, possibly exaggerated, possibly fabricated, or various degrees of both. But like the day-to-day stuff, this is stuff that we can confirm. These were real people. I'd say at least 70% of what you see in this movie is true story. So keep that in mind when you're watching it. Just the supernatural stuff is what was alleged in the book, and obviously the movie is based on the book. Now, there are some things that are completely fabricated or altered for the movie, and possibly for the book too, although it's been so long since I've read the book I couldn't tell you what were the differences between the book and the movie. Here's the thing, though. It's plot-wise and beat for beat, aside from the little girl spitting pea soup, it's essentially The Exorcist. Okay? I don't want that to deter you from watching this movie, but I want you to know that there are parts of this movie that they just copied and pasted straight out of The Exorcist. So keep that in mind. And some of it goes beyond homage and straight up into rip-off territory. Straight up. So you kind of have to have that in your mind as well as you watch this movie. If you can just watch this as a movie and just tell yourself that, like, okay, some of it is based on true events, but I'm just what I'm seeing here is fictional. Whether or not some of it is based on reality or not, let's just assume the movie is fictional. It's an enjoyable movie. But if you don't have the context going into it, and I know that's kind of spoilery, because if you just watch the movie and you don't know anything about it, you're just going to assume it was a movie. But the movie itself purports to be based on a true story. So you kind of have to have the background before you can go into it. Because if you don't, you're probably going to not get the full context of what this movie did or why it became the phenomenon that it is, because it is a franchise of at least 20-something plus movies. I'm not exaggerating either. There are more Amityville movies than there are Jason and Freddy movies combined. There's so fucking many Amityville movies. It's insane. That being said, if you're willing to understand the background and the history and put that into context, you can still enjoy this movie. And I still recommend it as a buy because, you know, it's still, regardless of the controversy, regardless of all of the you know, he said, she said stuffs, it's still a historically significant movie as well. Like I said, not because it was the first haunted house movie, but it was the first, like, I would say mainstream big, well, I wouldn't say big budget, but mainstream, like, highly financially successful haunted house movie that essentially wrote the checklist on how to make a haunted house movie going forward. And that's all I got. Stay cool.